We are continuing our series this morning, God's Story for Dummies. How the good news can be good again. Again, we're not trying to call anybody a dummy. What are these books really about? Do you remember? They're to help people, regular people, to get a kind of a working knowledge of any topic. Doesn't make you an expert, but enough to have a conversation. And sometimes I think we as followers of Jesus believe we have to have a degree in theology or specialize in apologetics in order to talk to people about our faith. And that's just not true. So our hope with this series is to help you to be able to tell God's story and the pivotal role Jesus plays in the story, often referred to as the gospel or good news. And again, what makes news good news? Well, we have been learning that something has to have happened, and that's a bad thing, so it causes a problem, and that's the context where a solution, something happens that is a solution to that problem, and then, it doesn't create a fix to the problem immediately. It's going to be sometime in the future, but because we know what's going to happen, we see that as good news, because we know the problem is going to be fixed. Does that make sense for everybody? We've only been talking about it for 6 weeks, so hopefully starting to sink in. Okay, let's review the four movements of God's story. So we've talked about creation, where God created a place where he lives with his partners, that's us humans, to rule the world in harmony forever. Sounds pretty good, but of course, that's not the way things stayed. There was what we call the fall, where there was humans decided to disobey God and not trust him anymore, and that led to evil entering the world and to death. In our podcast a few weeks ago, we talked about three kinds of death: physical death, which I think is pretty obvious; spiritual death, which is our identity and purpose; and lastly, relational death, which is our broken relationship with God. We're no longer his partners to rule the world in harmony forever. But even right in the garden, after it happens, God started giving us hope that there would be a restored relationship someday. God wasn't happy to just write us off, and he didn't just turn his back on us or decide to punish us forever. He wanted to have a restored relationship. So we see him doing some things which we read about in the Old Testament, starting with a man named Abraham. So God chose Abraham, and he said through Abraham, the entire world would be blessed. And then Abraham's family eventually became the nation of Israel, and they had an agreement with God that they would show other nations what it was like to have a relationship with God and what God was like, so they would want to follow God too. And that didn't work out so well for them. Eventually, they stopped following God and got taken off into exile. And during this time, we see these strange men. This was in the podcast last week, called prophets. And they came on the scene, and they kept telling the people what they were doing wrong, how they were breaking God's laws or not keeping up with the agreement. But they also kept reminding people about God, that God is loving and compassionate and merciful. Now, that's not always the way we think about God in the Old Testament, right? And that he's slow to anger. But he does get angry. What does God get angry at? Injustice. Thanks, Jen, for paying attention. Awesome. God gets angry at injustice. So the prophets would remind people of that, and so God allows people to experience the consequences of their actions after giving them chances. And again, we see the people of Israel getting chances, but we also see, like in the story of Jonah that we talked about, even their enemies got chances. So God is not unfair. He won't let evil go on unpunished forever. And then we kind of started off with the redemption part of the story at Easter time, where we talked about Jesus' death and resurrection, and how that's the pivotal point in God's story. Jesus' death and resurrection is the solution to the problem of the fall that our relationship with God was severed. So Jesus ushers in a way for us to have a restored relationship with God. So that's fixing the problem. So we now, that's good news, right? Because we know that fixes the problem of not being able to have a relationship with God. So, but the world isn't fixed yet. We still live in an evil world, and it's, thousands of years later. But we know what's coming. That's the restoration where God, so Jesus sets in motion the ending of the story, the coming restoration, where things get back to where they were supposed to be in the beginning, only better. A place where God can live with his partners to rule the world in harmony forever. So because we believe the good news about Jesus, we can now live differently because we can have a relationship with God now through Jesus until he does come back to usher in the final restoration. So today we're taking a little bit closer look at the teachings of Jesus, and we often refer to Jesus' teachings as upside-down teachings. They were so radical at the time, and even today, sometimes that it seems to go against what, I wouldn't say common sense, but against the sense of culture or the world. The world says one thing, and when Jesus taught was something different. So we're going to talk about something that Jesus taught an awful lot about, something that everybody's concerned about right now. I mean, gas prices are going up, supply chain shortages, inflation, taxes. Jay's favorite topic to preach about? Money and possessions. So I get a little video from the Bible Project we're going to watch together right now. That video was based on some teaching that Jesus gave in what's called the Sermon on the Mountain, and I'm going to have Mata come and read a portion of that for us this morning. So it's Matthew 6, 19 to 33 in the Contemporary English version, and it's found on the back of your coloring sheet if you want to follow along.
Don't store up treasures on earth. Moss and rust can destroy them, and thieves can break in and steal them. Instead, store up your treasures in heaven, where moss and rust cannot destroy them, and thieves cannot break in and steal them. Your heart will always be where your treasure is. Your eyes are a window for your body. When they're good, you have all the light you need. But when your eyes are bad, everything is dark. If the light inside you is dark, you surely are in the dark. You cannot be the slave of two masters. You will like one more than the other, or be more loyal to one than the other. You cannot serve both God and money. I tell you not to worry about your life. Don't worry about having something to eat, drink, or wear. Isn't life more than food or clothing? Look at the birds in the sky. They don't plant or harvest. They don't even store grain in barns. Yet your Father in heaven takes care of them. Aren't you worth more, much more than the birds? Can worry make you live longer? Why worry about clothes? Look at how the wild flowers grow. They don't work hard to make their clothes. But I tell you that Solomon, with all his wealth, wasn't as well clothed as one of them. God gives such beauty to everything that grows in the fields, even though it's here today and thrown into the fire tomorrow. God will surely do even more for you. Why do you have such little faith? Don't worry and ask yourselves, will we have anything to eat? Will we have anything to drink? Will we have any clothes to wear? Only people who don't know God are always worrying about such things. Your Father in heaven knows you need all of these. But more than anything else, put God's work first and do what he wants. Then the other things will be yours as well.
Thank you. So I found it very helpful to go back to the book we were reading earlier in the year called What If Jesus Was Serious by Skye Jethani. And I think we covered all the chapters up to half of the book, and the very next part of the book, oddly enough, talks about money. And have you ever asked yourself, why did Jesus focus so much of his teachings on money? Well, I think it's because it's a very appealing alternative to God. It puts us in control, which is part of original sin, right? We don't want to trust God. We want to decide for ourselves. And obviously, there's many concerns we can have in life. But typically, what we do as humans is we make one thing the ultimate concern. And Marcus, I need your help again, buddy. Do you want to come up here and stand on this chair and help me spin the wheel? Okay. Can you get up there by yourself? Okay. Are you close enough to give it a big spin? Okay, go ahead. Give it a spin. All right. Let's see what this one says. Money. Some people make money the most ultimate thing in their life. Go ahead. Spin it again. Oh, relationships. Some people, it's all about their relationships. Could be single, and you could have a boyfriend. It could be your friends. It could be your brothers and sisters. Give it another spin, buddy. Okay. Yes, it is. How about cars? Do we have any car guys here? I know every Friday night at our the A&W around from our house, they have a classic cars night. And I'm thinking those guys spend a lot of money on their cars. But it's not just cars. Maybe it's possessions. Do you have is your house the most important thing in your life? Is it your cottage? Is it your boat? Is it your bicycle? I mean, we can all make things our, let's see, who do I know? Hockey cards? Where's Sean? For me, it could easily be my workshop. I like to make things. Okay, give another spin, buddy. Big, hard spin. There we go. What are we going to get this time? Okay, family. Any moms in the house and dads? It's pretty easy to make our family the most important thing in our lives, isn't it? Another big spin, buddy. That was a big one. Look at that. Get to all these. How about fame? How many people aspire to be famous? Want to put your guitar on your back and play in bars and get a band and have crushing fame, play out stadiums? Anybody? Famous for writing a book, there's the wrong kind of fame too. We won't go there today. Okay, give it another spin. Oh, let's see. First yellow one of the day. What else can we make? Power. Who wants to be in control? Who wants to be in charge? Who wants to be the boss? Could be, you could want to be the Prime Minister of Canada. Here's a thankless job. And or maybe you just want to be the president of the bridge club. I don't know. Whatever power we can get sometimes is what we go after. Another big spin. We got a few more to go. Okay. Got the other yellow one. Sports. How many sports fans do we have here? David follows the Saskatchewan Roughriders. I don't know what that gives him a chance to be excited or not, but he's devoted. Big spin, buddy. Whoa, that was a really big one. Keep it going there. You got one more to go. There we go. Church. Can we make church the ultimate thing? It's important for us to have a nice building, to have programs for every aspect of our life, to have pastors that say things that we really want to hear. What does that do? It just points to whatever color, see? Good question. That's the last one. Give me a high five. And I got a little gift for you here too. Come on. Come over here. pick one. Make sure you share it with Mommy and Daddy, okay? All right. Let's give Marcus a big hand for helping me out this morning. Now, any of these things, in and of themselves, can be good things when they're used appropriately. But where's the line? What happens when we make something the ultimate thing other than God? What does it become then? The Bible calls that an idol. When I used to teach children, I used to say anything that is more important to us than God is an idol. And we can make any of these things more important to us than God. And then they become an idol. Tim Keller said an idol is usually a good thing that we make an ultimate thing. And that's why Jesus says you can't serve two masters. Now he's using a slavery metaphor, which is pretty strong language. Only in this case, the slave gets to choose the master. We can choose to trust God, or we can choose to take things into control for ourselves and pick any of these things and make them the ultimate thing. But only one thing will ever be ultimate. If we want God to be ultimate, when it comes to money, we must surrender our wealth to gain more glory for God. That doesn't mean we have to give all of our money. It just has to be used to gain glory for God. So how do we do that? How do we surrender our wealth to gain more glory for God? Well, I really like what Pastor Andy Stanley says in this particular case. He says that every time you get some money, give some away. Then you prove that money is not your master. Get some, give some. Every time. And I'm sure you're all thinking, so how much is he going to tell I should give away? Okay. Well, first of all, I suggest that every time you get paid, give first. Because if you wait to give out of what's left over, well, if you're anything like me, there's never anything that's left over. So I would suggest, based on biblical teaching, depending on what you believe or don't believe, to give 10%, save 10%, spend the rest, and give a percentage. If I asked everybody to give $10,000 right now, I don't think any of us could actually do it. I'm looking around to see who is looking away. They could actually have $10,000 to give. Anyway, that's okay. If you feel like you can't give 10%, then start with something smaller. 1%. That's what I did. I grew up in church. I grew up knowing that I should give something to the church. And for the early part of my life, I did not give. I would give occasionally. I would give something. It was usually pretty small because we didn't have much left over, just like you don't. And when I was challenged on this, I was challenged the same way I'm challenging you this morning. If you can't give this number, start small, but give a percentage. Give it regularly. Give it automatically. When you get paid, then you aren't tempted to spend it. And then, you know what? There always seems to be enough left over. Can't always get maybe your fourth Starbucks coffee in the week, but I found out that we did actually survive, and we can stand here and tell you about it today. And then if you feel like that's working out for you and God is blessing you, because he does promise to bless us if we give, then give another 1%. And I did that till I got to 10, and I stopped there because, the Bible talks about tithing in the Old Testament and 10%. And I stopped, and that's what I gave for a long time. And that's okay. That was good. There's nothing wrong with that. But again, I came across some teaching about the New Testament, and Jesus kind of raises the bar on giving here. He's telling us that maybe if God blesses you more, you should give more. So when I heard this, every year I've tried to give an additional 1%. Now this takes, how do I say this? I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. Let's put it that way. All I'm saying is that I want to mature in my faith. I want to trust God more, so I chose to give an additional 1% over the last number of years. And you know what? God has continued to bless us. I cannot complain. So now I'm sure you're asking the question, what do we give to? And the first answer every pastor gives is church. Should you give to your church? Do you like to have celebrations like this? Then we should give to our church. We do like to get together and worship God, but it does cost money to do this. We do like to bless people in our community. Our giving is not just about having meetings. We do like to give a significant part of our money away so that it helps other people, both in our church community and in the community beyond. But what else? Well, we can give our money to other charities, to good causes like True Wheels. But there's, in the Bible, when Jesus talks about the end of time and people who follow him, he said those who take care of the poor, those who bless people who are in prison, those who help the needy, those who clothe people without clothes. So we as followers of Jesus need to be constantly on the lookout for ways to bless people or support organizations that do that. So I'm not saying you should give all of your money just to the church. Okay? Now, most times, pastors, including myself in the past, stop here. You should give. But if you pay attention to what we read, there's more. Did you catch the part about the eyes? What was that about? Right in the middle of this talk about money, it's before and after. In the middle, there's this part about eyes being windows, and it just kind of seems out of place somehow. And again, if we think about our modern culture, we always think of ourselves on the inside of our bodies looking out. And what Jesus is saying, what is describing what we see with our eyes, and it's difficult to interpret what he's getting at with regards to money and possessions from this perspective. But again, in the book, Sky helps us out here. He says that people in Jesus' audience, when he was saying this, would have had a different perspective. The eyes are windows for actually people to see inside us what is in our hearts, whether we are motivated by good or evil. So Jesus is actually talking about our inner orientation, because that is what determines our outward behavior. So in the case of how we handle our wealth is a reflection of what's in our hearts. If we are full of light and have compassion, we are generous. If we are full of darkness, we're self-centered and we tend to be stingy and greedy. And if that's the case, then our heart needs to be transformed. I don't know about you, but I found that illuminating. Nobody? Got to stop with the dad jokes. Okay. Then Jesus launches into this big description of a carefree life without worry, and that's what our video was about. It seems kind of related to money, but at first glance it might be difficult to grasp what he's saying, and it's more than just trusting in God. So again, if you read the chapters in the book that Sky was talking about, what Jesus is talking about is our attitude towards money. And basically, as we learned in the video, it boils down to two attitudes toward money. Is the one, there's always enough to go around. That's the abundance mentality. And then the other one is there's never enough to go around, which is the scarcity mentality. So Jesus is telling us that if we live with a scarcity mentality, which is our default, by the way, then we will always be chasing after more. We will never have enough. No matter how much we get, we always want more. Ask any person who's actually rich if they have enough, and they will say no, they are always looking for more. And that's just how we're built. We're always going to crave more. That's our default, scarcity mentality. But Jesus said that trusting God, that's surrendering to doing things his way, empowers us to love others, to act generously, because God's perspective is that he has more than enough. That's our abundance mentality. So how do we live generously above and beyond regular giving? Because living generously isn't just about money. So you might ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? Ever heard that term, WWJD? Well, it's pretty much cliche now. Have you ever noticed somehow the people that wear those bracelets claim that Jesus would do lots of things that I'm not sure Jesus would actually do? In order for us to do what Jesus did, we have to know Jesus. We would have to study the Gospels and see how Jesus interacted with people and look at his whole life, not just one little specific thing or circumstance. That's kind of a big job. People spent a whole lifetime studying this. And for regular people to do this, it's a big job. I'm not going to lie. Even with me, it's part of my job. I find it hard. And most people just give up. And it's okay. But here, Jesus really helps us out. He gave us what's called the golden rule, right? Do for others what you would have them do for you. Wow. So, we want to live generous lives. Okay, so I want everybody to close your eyes. Think of somebody that you like, who you get along with. And ask yourself, if I were, fill in that person's name, what would I want today? See, it's pretty easy. And then you can think to do that. Maybe that friend would like you to call them today. Maybe they need help moving. Maybe they need, I don't know, you know them better than I do. So now, keep your eyes closed. Think of someone you don't like, someone who is difficult, someone who is hard to get along with, and ask the same question. If I were, fill in that person's name, what would I want today? A little harder, but you can open your eyes now. I'm going to really fall asleep. It's brilliant. This is really smart. Jesus says, do for others what you would have them do for you. It's brilliant. It's universal. But this is great information, don't you think? It's simple. We can all do it. But unfortunately, as I've been learning recently, information alone does not lead to character change. I hate that. Because every time we get together, I stand up here and I talk to you and I pass on great information, in my opinion. And I don't always see the life transformation that I want to see in all of you or even in myself. So, what's the problem? Well, according to some research done by Dr. Jim Wilder, the problem with thinking that learning is going to change our behavior, or even what would Jesus do, in his book, The Other Half of Church, is the problem is that we respond to character issues like this, or moral issues, with the right side of our brain faster than we can actually think about things. So it's very likely then that if we're put in a circumstance where we have to respond to a what would Jesus do kind of a situation, we've already responded before we can even think about what Jesus would do, even if we've read about Jesus and know what he would do. So that's a little troubling to me. So if character development, so that's fruits of the Spirit, happens in the right side of the brain, and that's the part of the brain that doesn't really respond to teaching, how does character get formed? How many have heard the expression more caught than taught? Nod your head, raise your hand. Okay. This is more like taught and caught. We have to understand what good character is, but for any change to take place, we have to see examples of it played out in real life by people we are connected to. That's why character development in children is formed by watching their parents. Not by taking them to Sunday school or to church, not by sending them to Christian schools, but your life, does what you as a parent do match up with what you say? Everybody's looking away. Me too. Ouch. We need to follow Jesus. We need to be an example of what that looks like to our kids. If I were to ask your kids what's the most important thing to you, would Jesus or God even make the top 5? Okay, and in my opinion, this is why we all need to be part of a missional community that goes beyond meeting twice a month to study sermon notes. We need to eat together and play together and get to know each other's stories and celebrate each other's birthdays and anniversaries. And only then there's a chance that there will be enough connection that we can actually grow in faith together and be transformed by the power of the Holy Spirit together, by example, to each other. So there's really a lot of ideas to unpack here in learning about this, and I think we're going to explore those a little more detail in the message series in the fall. But for now, we need to understand that generosity and living with an abundance mentality starts with reading and meditating on Jesus' behavior in the Gospels. What did Jesus teach and how did he live it out? And we need to pray, did a whole series on prayer, pray that God's will be done on earth as it is in heaven, through us, living a transformed life by the power of the Holy Spirit. And finally, practicing giving and generosity in our missional communities to each other and beyond.